Hey, I'm Rob Jolliffe, and this is a Sabre Limited Expert Series. Today we're going to talk about loading data, history data, into an ERP system. All right, so I get this question all the time when I am in the sales cycle with clients and I'm talking about buying an ERP system, which is, well, I want to bring all my history over. I want to load all my history into the system. And I say, well, I don't think that's a logical thing to do, and I don't think you should. And they always say, why? Like it's a challenge to explain it sometimes. So I thought, why don't I put together a video that explains sort of from the beginning why I think that is not always a good idea. And okay, let's kind of walk through this. So by the way, I'm Rob Jolliffe. I'm owner of Sabre Limited. I'm a Microsoft Dynamics Business Central expert. I'm also an expert in supply chain. I have a couple of assumptions that if you're watching this video, you're probably a manufacturing company and you're either using or want to use a mid-market ERP. And during your process, you've asked this question, or you would like to answer this question. By the way, this particular video, it doesn't matter if you're a manufacturing company or some other type of business. The answers that I'm giving you here are completely relevant. If you would like to have a chat with me about this video, there is a link in the description to my calendar. And so you're able to book a meeting with me. You can put a question in, which is fantastic. If you can put a question into the calendar appointment, there's a place to put a description of what you want to talk about. It gives me a heads up and I can prepare. And then when we have the meeting, it's more cost effective for both of us, more time effective. So why can't I migrate history to a new ERP? And the answer is you can, you just shouldn't. But let's get into it and take a look at it. First thing to remind you is an ERP is an accounting system, and being an accounting system, that means that it uses subledgers to track the details of the information you're collecting. So whether you're making a sale or you're doing a purchase or you're running a production job, there's a subledger that's containing and collecting all of that information. Now, data in a subledger eventually makes it to the general ledger in any proper ERP system. So if you load data in the subledger, you're going to end up with it in the general ledger. And what's going to happen is if I add history to subledgers, I create general ledger entries. That is the number one thing to kind of keep in mind about this. This is why we don't think it's a good idea. Now, it's also your job to get the data. So you're responsible for providing all of that history. And often the old ERP system doesn't have good ways of exporting history. We, ERP vendors, are going to give you the tools to load history. We don't know your ERP that you're coming from. That's not our expertise. You're going to have to go to the ERP vendor you bought your ERP from if you want to extract data. So you're going to end up spending a lot more time than you think, because the source and destination layouts are different. So in your source ERP, you're going to have the data in one format, but in the destination, you're going to have it in a different format. Now, another thing that I don't have a slide for, but it's really important, is that you're going to probably change data between your old ERP and your new ERP. And that means you're going to have to change all your history. So the question becomes like, well, is this really that hard, Rob? Like, why? I still don't understand why you're telling me not to do it. Sure, it's a lot of work, but I mean, it can't be that much. All right, so let's imagine this situation. You've been using your new ERP for a few months, and you decide you're going to load history into it. Maybe you haven't been using it for a few months, but whether or not you're using it for a few months or not, this explains the problem. So you want to import your accounts receivable invoice history, and particularly for Acme, because Acme is always giving you a hard time. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, you just import one historical invoice for Acme dated January 1st, 2020. I'm making this video in July 2022, so we'll just use July 2022 as today, and January 1, 2020 is 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. So it's a $1,000 invoice to Acme. Acme is one of your customers, and you sell stuff to them occasionally, not all the time. So now what you're going to do, though, is, let's say a couple weeks later, you're going to run, or maybe today, after somebody put the history in today and tomorrow, or yesterday and today, you're going to run a statement for Acme, and this is what your statement looks like. So if you notice, the historical invoice is on the statement of account for Acme. So you're going to try and collect $1,000 from Acme for a historical invoice they probably paid a few years ago. Now, obviously, when you see this, you're going to go, oh, wait a minute, we can't send the statement to Acme. This has got this historical invoice on it. How did they pay it? Did they pay it by credit card? Did they pay it by cash? Did they pay it by check? You're going to have to go find out, because you're going to have this accounts receivable from the past. So now you're going to have to fix to show that they paid it. And you're going to put in the $1,000 payment. So you find out that they paid by check, you put the $1,000 payment in. Now it happens that this historical invoice also has $50 of tax. It was a $950 product you sold them and had a $50 tax. So you're going to run your tax report at the end of July, and what you're going to get is you're going to get this adjustment of $50 of extra tax that you need to pay, because according to the system, you made a sale on January 1st, 2020. The ERPs are not smart enough to realize that you're putting in history. They just think you're putting an invoice in. So if you're putting an invoice in and it's due, the taxes are due also. So now you're going to fix that by putting in the historical payment of the tax, because you got to take it out of your general ledger. And now when you do that, obviously you've got to reconcile your bank. And now you show a $1,000 payment from Acme and a $50 payment to the tax authority that showed up in your bank. So now you got to do something to clean that up, because that's clearly not really in your bank. That didn't go into your bank account, and your bank balance will be out of balance because of it. So now you're doing adjusting entries there. And this just keeps, compounding. And for everything that you do to put a piece of history in, there's an alternate piece of history that's affected. Like there's a practical current piece of data that it rolls that up to. So your accounts receivable are overstated. So then you do your payments, and then your bank's understated, and then you do the corrections of that, and then you have an income tax due because the government thinks you made these sales. So eventually, yes, it'll all kind of work out in the wash after you've put all that data in, but you're essentially rekeying it in, and it's going to take less time than it did to put it in originally. But we're not talking about it'll take a day or two to put it in. We're talking it'll take months or years to put all that data in, depending on how far you want to go. So eventually, it becomes basically impossible to keep up. Now, I'll tell you the story of one very brave customer who decided to put their accounts receivable in. They wanted to be put in, and over my 25 years of my career, this is the one customer who did this. So out of hundreds of customers, one actually took a shot at doing it. They loaded 5 years of historical accounts receivable invoices because they wanted the customer to be able to click a button and see current invoices and historical accounts receivable invoices all in one place in their customer portal. Now, I'm going to argue, and I tried to explain this to them at the time, that creating a parallel system that had the archived history of all of their invoices in it, and giving the customer the ability to access those historical invoices, maybe even just a file folder that they could open up that showed all their historical invoices with dates and such on it very clearly, that would have been easier than what they did. But they did go ahead and they did this. So it took them 9 months full time by a senior CPA, and I believe there was a lot of assistance from the Oracle ERP vendor because they were pulling the data out of Oracle. And they loaded were the AR invoices, and then they put in these kind of payment. They had to put the payments in because they wanted the customer on the customer portal to be able to see the invoice and the method of payment for 5 years of history. They had no taxes on 99% of these. They were foreign sales. So the vast majority of their invoices that they put in the system were tax-free. So they didn't have the tax problem that I described earlier. But I think that is like an example of how much work this is. So if you want to hire, and this is just to put in accounts receivable invoices, if it would have taken another 8 or 9 months of another person, so maybe you could do them in parallel with 2 people, of accounts payable invoices, and then there's other types of history that they might put in. And if you're a manufacturing company, it's even more complicated because often you're buying raw materials, but you're converting them into finished goods. So you have to put your production orders in. Otherwise, what you end up with is a whole bunch of inventory history of raw materials that show up and never go anywhere, and a whole bunch of finished goods that are shipped to clients with no source. So you have to put those into. So what can you do? Because this is obviously a problem, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit before that there are other ways to deal with this. Export your history to Excel or even Access. If your ERP supports it, you could even create a custom table in your ERP. But use Access or Crystal Ports or Power BI or Jet Report. There's a whole bunch of products in the market that you could do this with, and basically take and blend or merge in the data from the new system and the old data that you've put into that database or into that static list. And like I said, if your ERP allows, you can just add a custom history table into your ERP system for the searching purposes. But otherwise, what you're doing is you're just keeping your old system. And there's going to be a point, probably within a year or two, of your going to the new system where you're no longer going into your old ERP. Or if you are going into your old ERP, it's always for almost the same pieces of data. It's always to see when was the last time we sold this product to this customer, or when was the last time, and you can pull that out into Excel. And it's never going to change. You don't need to maintain it. It doesn't get updated. You just need a place where somebody can go in, they can put in the customer name, they can search, and Excel has those filters across the top that would allow this to work really, really well. So like, it's super hard to do this. And I think we as ERP consultants just have seen enough customers try and do it and recognized how difficult it is. Where our recommendation is don't do it. It would at least double the cost of a typical ERP implementation, if not more than double the cost of it, from your point of view, from your staff, your resources, your time, the experts you have to pay within your organization, because it's just so hard to get that data. It's not just one dump of data and import it. There's no import tool that says import everything. They have to be done in order. When they're done in the correct order, each step is kind of clearing off the problems the last step created until you get to the bottom, and you'd have to go 3 or 4 layers at least, typically to fix it. Remember that whenever you're importing history, you're probably importing something that has to do with accounting, and that's all the areas where this problem happens. People think, well, I just want to see my inventory ins and outs. Like, that's not accounting. Yes, it is. Your inventory is part of your accounting system when you get a full integrated ERP. It might not be in an old system, but it is in the new system. So it can be a rabbit hole, and you definitely can load that data into Excel from your old system and use that, and even use it to create reports that go. But generally speaking, the short answer is just don't do this. Don't try and load your history into the new system. Try and keep access to your old system, or move your history into something like Excel so it's searchable and you can run reports against it. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please subscribe and follow our channel. We're always excited to release new videos and have new subscribers. It helps people find us on YouTube. Trying to do new videos in this series weekly. And obviously, we'd love you to subscribe and ring that bell icon as well. If you'd like to reach us, our email address is sales@sabrelimited.com. That'll come to me. Also www.sabrelimited.com to find our website, and I can be reached on Indeed. Please reach out to me on, LinkedIn. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Rob Jolliffe. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.